Friends, welcome. I'm grateful that you've tuned in today as we celebrate the life of Dr. Eldon E. Snyder. I'm sitting where Eldon would usually sit when he was in worship. That is, when he wasn't at the lake, which I suspect was his other sanctuary. What follows in this service are reflections from friends and family on Eldon's life as a dad, a husband, a grandfather, and a friend. You'll hear musical reflections that reflect Eldon's love of Lakeside and the memories he shared there, as well as his love and passion for all people. Friends, while we can't gather physically, I hope that you know the family appreciates your prayers and kind words during this time. May this service be a gift to you as we commemorate Eldon's life.
I'm Betty Lockoff, a longtime friend of Eldon Snyder's. My husband and I met Peggy and Eldon in this church over 50 years ago. And they had come from Kansas for Eldon's new job, and my husband and I had been students at BGSU. Both couples were high school sweethearts. And so after the passing of both of our spouses, Eldon and I have become good friends. And we have done many, many things together and expanded our interest and have given much joy to each other. One of those activities was we like to read poetry to each other. And Eldon loved to hear me read, and I would encourage him to read, but he would usually keep nudging me into doing this. And of course, we read from his grandson, Andrew's published book of poetry, but we also had a favorite poet, and that is Maya Angelou. And about 2 months before Eldon went into another realm, he said, "Betty, I want you to read this poem at my memorial service." And I thought, okay, but I didn't respond. But what he did, he had a copy of it on a stand beside his bed. And he said to Connie and Susan, his daughters, "I do want Betty to read this poem." So Eldon, in honor of you, And honoring your request, I am going to read Maya Angelou's poem. It is Alone. Lying, thinking last night how to find my soul a home where water is not thirsty and bread loaf is not stone, I came up with one thing, and I don't believe I'm wrong, that nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone. Nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. There are some millionaires with money they can't use. Their wives run around like banshees and their children sing the blues. They've got expensive doctors to cure their hearts of stone. But nobody, no, nobody can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone. Nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. Now, if you listen closely, I'll tell you what I know. Storm clouds are gathering and the wind is gonna blow. The race of man is suffering and I can hear the moan. 'Cause nobody, no, nobody can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone. Nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. And Eldon, in your earthly life, you were not alone. You're not alone now. Peggy's probably playing the organ in the background. You might be playing handball with Gerald. You taught him so well. Pickleball wasn't in vogue then. And all of the saints who've gone before you, I know you are rejoicing. And you know what? I'm going to be joining you soon. Here's to you.
With your eyes you have searched me, and while smiling have spoken my name. Now my boat's left on the shoreline behind me. By your side I will seek other seas. Possessions. My boat carries no gold and no weapons. You will find there my nets and labor. Oh Lord, with your eyes you have searched me, and while smiling have spoken my name. My boat's left on the shoreline behind me. By your side I will seek other seas. Oh Lord, with With your eyes you have searched me, and while smiling have spoken my name. Now my boat's left on the shoreline behind me. By your side I will seek other seas. By your side I will seek other seas.
Susan and I feel very lucky as we had two wonderful parents who were in love with each other. Both were strong Christians and loved their family. The last 6 months have been a challenge for Dad as he required full-time care. Susan and I were his constant caregivers so he could remain at home. In reflecting on Dad's life, there are several key values that we both see Dad lived by, and the following thoughts are a combined effort of both Susan and mine. Faith. Paramount to everything, Dad's faith directed his life. He was a man of integrity and valued all human life. He lived by the principles of Matthew 25:31 through 40, where Jesus said, "The mark of a true Christian is to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, invite in a stranger, and clothe the naked." The key element of these principles for Dad was to help the vulnerable. With these principles as his guide, he spent time with underprivileged children in a basketball program located in Toledo. He volunteered and gave devotions at a center for delinquent youth. And for 15+ years, he volunteered at CASA, where he was appointed by the court to be a special advocate for abused children, helping to determine what was in the best interest and safety for a specific child.
His faith called him to be concerned for social justice in our society. He did sociological studies of migrant workers and Native Americans to help educate people about the injustices these groups were experiencing. This fall, with the racial protests around the country, he felt need to participate in 2 Zoom groups at church discussing how, as individuals, we can improve racial tensions and bring radical reconciliation with those that suffer oppression. Even up to the night before he went into the hospital, he was sharing with his church small group the concept of a caged bird. A bird encaged by oppression, crying out to be freed, and the responsibility we each have to help those in need so that we can right the inequality and injustice within our society and around the world. Daily, he was driven to make a difference in the lives of others, feeling that the purpose for living is to have a positive impact on others. Family. Mom and Dad were childhood sweethearts, committed to each other early in their lives. Like most couples, they endured some difficult times, starting with the loss of their firstborn, Diane, who lived only 16 days. Prior to the loss of Diane, Dad's status as a new father exempted him from the Korean War draft. With the loss of a child, he was no longer exempt. So, as they grieved Diane, Dad joined the Army, and approximately 6 months later, he was in Korea. Then at the age of 33, Mom got breast cancer, which was followed by a hysterectomy a few months later. Was it difficult? Certainly. Was it life-changing? Most definitely. But they treasured their marriage and family, always steadfast for their love, realizing that life is precious. As a father, Dad felt strongly that parents should support and encourage activities that we pursued. He always attended our piano recitals, choir and band concerts, handbell concerts, and sporting competitions. He helped me in my attempt to join the high school boys' tennis team, but since it was before Title IX, I was refused simply because I was a girl. When my United States Tennis Association travel team made it to nationals in 2012 at Indian Wells in California, both of my parents were there since they knew it was important to me. Our team, by the way, placed 3rd in the country. At Lakeside, when I played tennis or pickleball, he was always on the sidelines cheering me on. For Susan, he loved to watch her do sign language, a musical dance with her fingers which spoke to his heart. When we were growing up, Dad felt it was important for us to see the world and the country. We would travel for most of the month of August, camping in our canvas tent all over the United States, with national parks as a common attraction. I remember the summer before my 4th grade, Dad was really interested sociologically in Native Americans. We traveled that August visiting reservations and learning all about the various tribes in the Southwest. We spent one day hiking through an area where he wanted us to understand that we were standing on sacred land that was soon going to be underwater due to a dam. We also toured throughout Europe, which was piggybacked on him presenting research at sociology meetings. The month we spent together as a family camping and seeing the world is something we both loved to do when we were growing up, and we will always treasure. Mom and Dad's commitment to their marriage and family serve as a wonderful role model for both of us and their grandchildren, and is an exemplary example of what it means to love and honor to the end. Education. Dad was a great thinker and a constant learner even to the end. Education is a strong value for the Snyder family, starting with both of Dad's parents attending college, with his dad just shy of a PhD due to not submitting a dissertation. All of Dad's siblings and all of our cousins have at least attended college and many establishments beyond. He started his career as a high school history and social studies teacher in Kansas. He furthered his education through the GI Bill, obtaining his master's and PhD in sociology at the University of Kansas. He was continuously doing research and submitting to journals, which he found energizing, always finding great interest in various social components to study. He is a founding father of the North American Society of Sociology of Sport, a fact he is very proud of, and is world-renowned for his research in sociology of sport. He also co-authored a textbook with Elmer Spritzer, Social Aspects of Sport, which went into a third edition. He was constantly reading and had a curious mind. He challenged everyone around him to continue to learn. As a family, our dinner talk wasn't the typical, "How was your day?" but instead were many classes where he talked about new concepts and sociological ideology, expanding our minds with various concepts such as McDonaldization or gentrification. He would often have the concept already mapped on a large sheet of paper, showing us a framework of how a specific concept splintered into other avenues within a society. He would say, "See? See how that works?" Our cousin Debbie would remark, "I always feel like I'm back in college when I visit you." 10 years ago, Hannah, his granddaughter, suggested we start a family book read. Dad loved to analyze specific societal aspects of our books, which always led to lively discussions of moral and social issues, both past and present. Dad's value for education is a strong foundation for our entire family, and we are fully aware that we have been privileged to have a good education while others are struggling just to survive with the wide economic and other forms of disparity in our society. Thank you, Dad, for expanding our minds. Work ethic. Our dad also had a remarkable work ethic. Being the first child of parents who grew up on farms, he was expected to work at an early age. At age 6, he had a paper route. Then when he was 12, a woman who was recently widowed came to Grace Methodist Church in Winfield, Kansas, looking for a farmhand for the summer. Our grandfather offered Dad, and he was sent home with this stranger that afternoon. Dad was terribly homesick that summer. He was allowed to flag down the train on Saturday afternoon to spend the night at home, only to go back to the farm Sunday afternoon. It seems unreasonably cruel, and it did have a profound effect on Dad. But from my grandparents' perspective, the widow needed help. And growing up as farm kids, farmers always helped other farmers in need. We both feel Dad's parents had unrealistic expectations for him to always have a job. However, these experiences did formulate in him a strong work ethic and shaped his character. He lived by the motto, "If something is worth doing, give it your all." Another aspect that Dad worked hard and excelled at was sports. The Snyder family is very competitive and also extremely talented athletically. There was one year Dad's 3 cousins and his brother David were all high school state champions in 4 different sports. We always remember Dad doing something athletic: church softball and basketball leagues, refereeing high school basketball, jogging, biking, handball, triathlons, tennis, and pickleball. He just loved to compete and exercise. He was a top-notch handball player and competed and won many tournaments throughout the Midwest. I feel the twisting and turning in a bent position at the waist from handball is why Dad's back had spinal stenosis, resulting in the loss of all of the muscles below his knees. I never did get used to seeing his stick legs, yet even with this disability, it didn't deter him, and he continued to play tennis, pickleball, and bike in later years. For his 80th birthday, Dad wanted a new bicycle, which he enjoyed until recently. He would ride the rail trail at BG, and Dad and I would often ride to Johnson's Island or around the peninsula at Lakeside, late in the afternoon. In the summer when we were kids, Dad would take us to the tennis courts after dinner, where he would help us practice and work on our tennis skills. For me, spending time with Dad playing catch, tennis, pickleball, biking, etc. was special and is something I'm going to miss greatly. Friendships. Dad cherished his friendships from church, such as Hearth and Chapel, and the various Sunday school classes he attended over the years. He had a strong connection with the handball community when he was playing, and more recently, the tennis, spinning, and pickleball groups here at BG. He treasured the Lakeside community with friends from a variety of activities he participated in, such as art, education, religion, tennis, and pickleball. After Mom died in 2013, Betty Lockoff became a special companion for Dad. They enjoyed each other's company with lively discussions about books and events, and sharing their love of Lakeside. Especially during this last year when Dad's health was deteriorating, Betty gave Dad moral strength to continue, as he always looked forward to having Betty by his side. Humor. Generally, Dad was pretty serious and studious, yet he could be lighthearted at times. He would challenge the grandkids to see who could suck the longest on a lifesaver, see who could eat crackers and whistle first, or show his magic trick where he would intertwine two forks, balance them with a toothpick on the side of a glass, and then burn the end of the toothpick. Dad also felt it was wrong to swear, so one time I said, "Geez," and Dad admonished me saying that was a derivative of Jesus, so I never did it again. He did have his own made-up phrase, and that he would say when he was upset or frustrated. I know many of you will recall that when he was mad, he'd say, "Oh, crock." Where he learned or came up with that term, I have no idea. But it was never offensive, and it was all Dad's. The other thing Dad did was he was a whistler. He usually whistled hymns, but sometimes he would also whistle popular tunes from Dad's eras, such as "Fly Me to the Moon." He had a pretty good month during October, and I could tell he was feeling a little better, because it was one of the few times I heard him whistle these last 6 months. Peace. Dad was at peace, and even though he was still fighting, he was ready to go. He would want us to carry on, but with purpose. Share our knowledge, but continue to question and learn. Share God's love, but with open arms to all. Dad would want us to live each day determined to make a difference. This last day was a struggle. This last year was a struggle for Dad. Similar to a caged bird, Dad was trapped in a declining body. But now he is free to fly and sing. We love you, Dad.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine, but other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. May truth and freedom come to every nation. May peace abound where strife has raged so long, that each may seek to love and build together a world united, righting every wrong. A world united in its love for freedom, proclaiming peace together in one song.
Thank you all so much for coming to this service to help us remember the life of my grandfather, Eldon Snyder. Grandpa was a teacher who always thought class was in session. From as early as I can remember, whenever we would visit Grandma and Grandpa's house, I remember wondering if Grandpa was going to give us a seminar. Grandpa would recycle his class discussion materials on the family. We listened to oral histories, watched slideshows, and had seminar discussions at many family get-togethers. Grandpa instilled in us grandkids a curiosity about the world and a love of learning, whether we wanted to or not. Grandpa was a reader who read books and articles on just about every topic. He always wanted to know what books you were reading, and most often had already read them. In addition to our family seminars, Grandpa loved a good book discussion, leading our family through discussions of biographies, novels, historical fiction, and more. I've always thought Grandpa's love language was in the form of the written article. You always knew he was thinking of you when he'd email you an article he thought you might enjoy. Not just an intellectual, Grandpa loved learning about art. He spent years studying watercolor painting, exploring the joy color and line can bring. He, Grandma, and Betty spent years attending art museum events and talks at the Toledo Art Museum, Lakeside, and more. He loved the poetry of Maya Angelou and paintings that brought whimsy and color to the fore. Grandpa was also tough and determined. He regaled us with stories of working on the farm as a kid, and much to the grandkids' horror, stories about hunting and eating rabbits as a main food source. He and my grandma captained 2 major camping trips across the country for our family that opened my horizons and introduced me to the beauty of the American West. When the inevitable happened, as it does on any major camping trip, and the rain came, Grandpa was never one to give up. When the rest of us were ready to abandon our campsite and find a hotel to dry our tents and socks, Grandpa wouldn't hear of it, toughing it out through all conditions. And when colon cancer came, much later in life, Grandpa was still just as determined, bravely facing the road ahead with courage and tenacity. Grandpa was a reader who loved learning, an athlete who loved the psychology of game and competition, a teacher who loved exploring how people work, an art lover who painted, a community-oriented citizen, and a husband, father, and grandfather who supported his family and all our endeavors with kindness, generosity, and curiosity. Grandpa, you will be missed greatly by your friends, family, and community. Thank you for being such an incredible role model. We love you. Say hi to Grandma for us.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm one of Eldon Snyder's grandchildren, and I'm going to share a few memories today of my Grandpa Snyder. Grandpa was a dedicated educator, a loving husband, an accomplished athlete, and a talented artist. He was a believer in lifelong learning, and I have vivid memories of family get-togethers where we'd have a specific time set aside for one of Grandpa's seminars where he would present a topic to the family for discussion, either something he was currently studying, or something he talked about in one of his classes, or something that he'd read recently. Grandpa was an avid reader, and I remember that he always had a book he was working through. And if you open that book, it frequently had notations or portions that he had underlined as he interacted with the text as he was reading. Grandpa and Grandma Snyder were also world travelers, and they introduced the people in their lives to travel, starting with their daughters. They took my mom, Susan, and my aunt, Connie, on trips overseas as well as on camping trips. On one infamous camping trip, they met with a bear who was interested in their campsite, or maybe more accurately, interested in the food at their campsite. Others might recall this story a little bit differently, but the way I remember it being recounted to me was that everyone piled into the car to escape the bear, and then Grandpa tried to scare it away by honking on the horn, and I think by opening the driver's side door every so often to jump out and yell, "Hey!" I'm not exactly sure how the story ends, because Grandpa shouting and honking to scare the bear away is kind of the highlight. But I believe everyone survived the encounter, including the bear. Grandma and Grandpa also passed their love of travel on to their grandchildren. When we were young, they took us on many family trips, including 2 where we drove across the country, visiting several of the great national parks in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. As we traveled, I remember that Grandpa would make drawings in a little flip book. He would document with a small sketch something memorable from each day, such as a depiction of a snake to memorialize our encounter with a rattlesnake at Zion National Park, or a hat to represent the persnickety Ranger Snyder that we met at one of the parks. Whatever it was, he'd sketch it and then share it with us later as a way of reflecting on the memorable events on our journey. And today, as we reflect on Grandpa's life, I will remember him as someone who was alert and thoughtful, always interacting with new ideas and with new experiences. I'll remember that he loved his family and that he was dedicated to his work, to the cause of social justice, and to his church. Grandpa, we love you, we miss you, and we will always remember you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tix Newman. I am one of Eldon's grandchildren, and I wanted to share some thoughts with you guys today. I'm very grateful to have known Eldon and to have been touched by his spirit. He really was one of the most kind and generous people that I've ever met. He was always a rock in the family. His presence was always there, and it was always felt. And it wasn't like a loud presence, but he was just always constantly just there. He was the rock. He was calm and he was steady, but he was always armed with like a little quip or a little morsel of knowledge that he wanted to share. And I really loved that about him. He really was always wanting to teach. That was his love language. Every holiday he wanted to share some thoughts with us, and he would a lot of times sit us down and read a Maya Angelou poem to us, or he would tell us about a book he was reading and kind of give us a lesson on what he felt like his current thoughts were on the inner workings of the human spirit. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand that. I felt like, why is he always constantly trying to teach us? But as I got older, I really realized that was just his way of saying, I love you. And not only was he, always a teacher, but he was always a learner as well. He was what my mother would call a lifetime learner. even up until his last days, he was constantly trying to educate himself about current events, and he was very passionate about, LGBT issues, and very passionate about racial inequality. And like, I'm so inspired by that spirit, the fact that he never wanted to stop learning about those things, even up until his last moments. He really did have a deep passion for fighting for minorities. He was always quietly trying to do his best to help those who are less fortunate. And that's really inspiring to me. He never asked for praise. He never wanted people to give him a pat on the back for doing it. He just helped because he felt called to. I am so grateful that I knew Eldon. He taught me so much about expecting nothing in return, but giving because you want to. That is one of the biggest takeaways that I took from Eldon, because he never really wanted to sit and be thanked for what he was doing. He wanted to just give because he wanted to do it. He taught me to, fight for those that society looks down on. He taught me to never stop learning and to listen to others and gather as much information as possible with an open mind. He taught me that the words "I love you" come in many different forms. And I'm thankful for all those lessons, Grandpa. You are sorely missed, but you're always with us. We love you. Thank you.
Let me start with a quote from the Sufi philosopher Ibn Arabi. "It is God who is revealed in every face, sought in every sign, gazed upon by every eye, worshipped in every object of worship, and pursued in the unseen and the visible." I want to consider two aspects of Grandpa's life: his study of religion and his study of sociology. I want to consider them as ways he turned outward, ways he turned toward the world. Grandpa regularly read books on religion and participated in church study groups, focused on religion's impact in the world, how religion should inform our actions in the world. Grandpa regularly did research and published articles in sociology, focused on the social aspect of athletics, how sports informs the lives of participants and of audience. And Grandpa regularly gave his time to volunteer organizations like CASA, focusing his energy on those in need to add to the betterment of his communities. I began with a quote from the Sufi philosopher Ibn Arabi. In Islam, there is a traditional notion of the 99 names of God, that each of these names is an epithet naming an aspect of divinity, such as mercy, compassion, love. In Arabi's worldview, he understood these names to be the named world, that as the products of a creator, we, creation, reproduce those aspects of divinity. In other words, a divinity participated in the universe by creating the universe, and having been created, the universe reflects divinity, continues to participate in divinity. It is a worldview where, looking out at the world, one looks out at holiness, where meaning comes from looking outward. I said I want to consider Grandpa's study of religion and of sociology as ways that Grandpa turned toward the world. For Grandpa, he made meaning by looking outward, by participating in the world. His study of religion was not a study that distanced the physical from the spiritual. It was a study of how the spiritual should shape our physical actions. His study of sociology of sport was not the study of a distanced subject. It was the study of an activity in which he participated, asking how meaning was made for amateur athletes like himself, for those professionally involved in athletics, like family members he loved. Grandpa lived outwardly. He protested the Vietnam War. He assisted a volunteer medical aid organization. He brought books to the housebound. He advocated for vulnerable children. Revealed in every face, sought in every sign, gazed upon by every eye. Grandpa created meaning. He created a force for love acting upon and within the world. I miss you, Grandpa, and I love you.
Dying, Christ destroyed our death. Rising, Christ restored our life. Christ will come again in glory. As in baptism, Eldon put on Christ, so in Christ may he now be clothed with glory. Here and now, dear friends, we are God's children. What we shall be like has not yet been revealed, but we know that when he appears, we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Those who have this hope purify themselves as Christ is pure. I invite you to hear these words of grace. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. For I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of hell and death. And because I live, you shall also live. And this is the hope that we have for Eldon today. Often during times of grief, the Holy Scriptures give us words of comfort. I invite you to hear these words from Psalm 82. Give justice to the poor and the orphan. Uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute. Rescue the poor and the helpless. Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. Several years ago, I had finished with a sermon, and Eldon always liked to offer keen advice after the sermon. So often I wanted to include his insights in my sermons, and I often appreciated his feedback. On one particular Sunday, I had preached an ordinary sermon. It was during the summer, and summers in our college town are usually pretty relaxed. I was feeling pretty good about my sermon until I talked to Eldon. It was when the Me Too movement was gaining some traction in our world and in the media. I'd finished preaching, and Eldon was wondering why I hadn't given voice to that, or why I didn't include that in my sermon. And for some reason, I took more offense than normal with his feedback. I thought how ironic that you, as a male, are speaking to me about how I should or should not speak about my role in the world as a woman. I took it personally. I grew a little reactionary, said a few things, and walked away. Fortunately, my frustrations with Eldon were short-lived. I knew that he was coming from a place of support, advocacy, and a desire to give voice to the voiceless. I think he knew I could give a better voice to the poor, the orphan, and the destitute. And I hope that I'm a better follower of Christ because of his feedback. You know, when I prepare a sermon, I always try to have an idea of who's in the audience. I think to myself, what's an atheist hearing when they hear this sermon? What's the person who's been in the church for decades hearing when I offer this sermon? And finally, what's the opposition to what I'm saying? Who might argue differently or offer another point of view? And when I prepared a sermon, Eldon was always in my head, offering a different way to view something. I would hear him in my head as he reminded our Sunday school class while we were reading the Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann that to be silent is to be complicit in the evil and unjust systems in our world. And our God, our Creator, calls us to so much more. I would hear him in our racism small group asking good, deep questions, forcing us to ponder how God was calling us to be anti-racist, sharing his own experiences of racism growing up in Kansas. I would hear him reminding me that God's love is deep and wide. I would hear him telling me about his kids at CASA and how grit was so much more of a determining factor in the outcome of someone's life than talent, and how he saw grit in the lives of so many of the youth that he worked with. I, like many of you I'm sure, am grateful to receive some of the gifts that all Eldon offered to our world. There's a story in Mark's gospel when two of the disciples are arguing about who will get to sit at the right hand of the throne of God in heaven. And Jesus calls his disciples over and he tells them, if you truly want to be great in this life, then you must become the servant of all. You first must serve others. You've already named the ways that the Eldon lived it, how he stewarded his God-given gifts well, his intellect, his passion for justice and equality for all people, for inclusion of all people in the life of the church and the world, his lifelong love for Peggy and his family, his lifelong work in sociology and sociology of sport. I know there are so many more stories that we could share about Eldon's life, and I hope that you'll continue to reach out and share your stories and reflections with the family. The prophet Isaiah offers these words of hope to us from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 28 through 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases power to the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not go weary. They will walk and not be faint. And may it be so for Eldon. May it be so. Would you pray with me? Eternal God, you have shared Eldon with us, but before Eldon was ours, he was yours. For all that he has given to make us what we are, for that of Eldon which lives and grows in each of us, and his life and your life that will never end, we give you thanks. And now we offer Eldon back into your arms. Comfort us in our loneliness, strengthen us in our weakness, and give us courage to face the future unafraid. Draw those of us who remain in this life closer to one another. Make us faithful to serve one another, and give us to know that peace and joy which is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.